You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody, and thanks for coming back to join me on Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I'm Mighty Blue, and I've got another pretty long show for you today. I don't plan things this way, but there are too many good things to leave out. That said, I've left something out this week. We won't have the ATC on the show because I have a response from Maury Johnson following the interview I did with Andrew Downs of the ATC a couple of weeks ago, when he put the ATC side of this thorny issue of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Maury wanted to talk about the deal that the ATC did with Mountain Valley, and I asked him on the show. Maury will be on in the third section of our show. Our main guest today is Juliana Chauncey, or Chaunce, a fellow member of the class of 2019, even though we didn't meet, and a fellow podcaster. Chaunce will be on soon. After Chaunce, Katie Westling of Phoenix Rising will be sharing with me her last-minute arrangements, and yes, her last-minute nerves. She heads to Georgia over the coming weekend, and her appearance on the show will be from the AT next Thursday. Then, after Maury, Larry Luxembourg tells the stories of people even older than me hiking the trail, with age and disabilities making you shake your head at how brave some of our fellow hikers have been over the years. But let's get on and meet Chaunce. I'd like to introduce you all to a voice many of you may already know. This is Juliana Chauncey, or Chaunce. Hey Chaunce, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing good.
And I meant to say, your trail name isn't quite as original as one or two others. It's actually just dropped one letter out of your name. Did you ever think of another trail name, or was it always Chaunce?
I had a different trail name at the start of the PCT. At first, I was being called Wrangler,
Right.
because I drove a Jeep Wrangler, and we met a couple that was fly fishing off trail, and they got their car stuck, and I had just come out of a bush and told them I could help them get unstuck, and the guy did not believe me at all. He did not think I could help him get this SUV unstuck, and I was like, I drive a Wrangler, I can do it. And he ended up caving after he tried enough times, and we got him unstuck.
Cool.
And then went on to dinner. But the group I was hiking with, they had been calling me Chaunce for so long by that point. That was a couple 100 miles in, that it seemed like I was lying to people that we were meeting when I would introduce myself to them as Wrangler and then just be Chaunce to everyone else that knew me.
Yeah.
So
because they are important. Don't you think they're, maybe not for you, but I think they're quite important. They assume a certain persona, don't they?
To some people, I think so. I never really particularly cared too much. I mean, I've always had nicknames. No one really calls me Juliana, like my full name. So I mean, I've always had plenty of nicknames. I worked at a summer camp where you had to have a camp name so that the kids couldn't find you on social media.
Oh, really?
So I didn't really I didn't feel that need for a name or something like that. Yeah.
I think, I don't know if it's more of an AT thing, but certainly seems to be quite an important thing in the AT. Most people really think about the name before they go, probably because they don't want to be landed with a crappy one when they're out there. But what I mentioned just now, several of you may know Chaunce's voice. She's one of the presenters of Backpacker Radio, the podcast that she does with Zach Davis. And she's also an author, by the way, and I'll come back to that soon. First, I want to start with your hiking. And your first long-distance hike was the PCT in 2017. Why a long-distance hike at that point in your life, and why the PCT?
Yeah, so I hadn't really been super outdoorsy in college. It just wasn't what my friends were doing. I went outside enough as a kid to have an appreciation for the outdoors, but it didn't really come until after college. I had studied abroad in Thailand, and I liked, really cheap backpacking, in the sense of, city hopping rather than, hiking trails.
Sure.
So I was just pinching pennies in college to take, little trips on breaks overseas, go around Europe a bit, go around Southeast Asia. And when I had finished my study abroad, everyone was starting to say that you get a lot of depression coming back to the U.S. And, just going back to your normal life, because it all seems like exactly the same, and you had this rich experience, and then you go back home and nothing's different.
Wow.
And you just long for it again. And
Did you feel that? Did you feel that?
No, I didn't, because I didn't want that to happen. So I intentionally applied to a summer job at a camp that was as far away from New York as I could get without requiring like a visa or anything like that. So I went to California to work at a summer camp that was in the northern Sierra Mountains, just outside of Sierra City, which is a resupply spot on the Pacific Crest Trail. Right. So we would take kids up to the Sierra Buttes, which is along the trail. We would take them up Donner Pass to climb, which is along the trail. We'd have our day offs in Truckee, which is, another resupply town, or Tahoe, South Lake being another resupply town. So I knew a lot about the area, and a lot of the spots that hikers go through in that area, I had been numerous times with campers. And I saw the symbol.
Someone's trying to tell you something, obviously.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. But I didn't have any summers free. I was working at the camp.
Right.
And then it was the year I decided I wasn't going to go back that I, was looking at a free summer for the first time since high school. And I figured, why not try it? So it was just right place, right time, something I knew of. So I just gave it a go.
Was it something that you knew about in terms of what was required to go on there? Had you read Zach's book for a start? Appalachian Trails or Pacific Crest Trails?
Zach, yeah, I have his book. I read a few pages of it.
Of course you have. You've got to say that.
He gave it to me when I met him, which was really nice of him. It was like here in case you need it. And I read a few pages of it. He probably thought I needed it after I told him I was going to pack a hammock to use in my free time. Which was kind of him. But,
free time, yeah.
Yeah, that didn't happen. But yeah, I hadn't prepared for it. Well, actually, I prepared for it a ton. What am I talking about? I had an ex that was obsessed with it. I worked with a guy at that summer camp who I was dating who was obsessed with the PCT. And so he would watch these YouTube videos. And I actually met one of the guys at the PCT class video presentation in San Diego. I met one of the guys that he was obsessed with on YouTube, and I was like, oh my god, you're this guy that I used to watch years ago.
That's funny.
And so we saw a bunch of different like trail videos that he would keep on at night, and I knew about a lot of the things I'd need from that. And then I just became kind of obsessed with like research, like whatever I could get, as I know it sounds so typical, but as light as I could get it. Because I'm only 5'1". I'm only, I started the trail for the PCT. I put on weight to start the trail, which was stupid. But on average, I'm only around 115, 120 pounds. So I didn't want a heavy base weight. I knew that would, be risk for injury, putting me out. So I just did a lot of research on gear, comparing weights, comparing reviews. I did a lot of research on foods that would stay preserved well. I didn't dehydrate anything myself because I couldn't afford a dehydrator. And like the logistics of that kind of seemed a lot. But I bought a vacuum sealer and like would reseal giant portions of things into individual sizes. Like big bag of M&Ms, I would measure out on a food scale the portions so I would know how many calories they were. And
you were prepared.
None of that mattered when I got on trail. I didn't track any of it. Like absolutely not. So it was just, I think beforehand it was like me getting ready to do it, which kept my nerves down, I would say.
It's almost a hobby in itself, isn't it? Preparing for a trail, and yet it's nothing to do with being on the trail at all, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the only trail I did that for. I had no interest in it once I realized I'm not actually using any of this on trail. Like I'm not paying attention to any of these things. Yeah. And I feel like doing it once made me feel prepared for that trail, and then once I felt prepared for that, the other ones didn't feel as scary.
Were you scared when you started?
No, I was excited. I was just really excited. Zach's actually pointed it out that it's kind of like almost strange that I don't get nervous at all. Like the AT, I quit my job on a Friday and started hiking on a Sunday. And leading up to it, he was like waiting on episodes for me to like start saying I was nervous, and I was just like, yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And I think a trail like this or any other long distance trail gives you a confidence that you can do stuff you didn't think you could do before. So you start, and the thing that always would put me off the PCT, although everybody now tells me it's great, starting and going across the desert. But the desert is different to what what I imagine the desert to be. I mean, I think the Sahara Desert, all bloody sand and that, but it's not like that at all, is it? So what was that like? Was that a good build up for you to get in shape, ready to take on the Sierras, or how'd that work out?
Um, the desert like kicked my ass completely. It
All right.
was
Good start.
so hard.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand how to prepare for the trail, so I put on weight because all I was seeing was you lose weight, you lose weight, you lose weight. So I was like, all right, I'll put on weight. And like, you don't have any of these foods you like or whatever. All these different things. So I was like, I'm gonna eat what I want. I'm gonna, drink and enjoy town life while I'm in town leading up to this. And then I'm gonna go on the trail a bit heavier, but by the time I get off trail, I'll be back to the same again.
Sure.
And so I called it bulking season.
Nice.
Put on a good 10 pounds, and it was so painful when I started. The heat of the desert, with me being like a ginger and pale skinned and afraid of sun, was not kind. My pack was heavier than it should have been because I thought I would be having free time, so I brought things like books and a hammock, even though I was such a little gram weenie with like the actual weight of my pack and other things. I had never done a multi-day backpacking trip before, so I didn't understand the pain I was going to feel. Like day 2, I was popping blood blisters on the bottom of both of my heels and like draining blood out of my heels. It was really hard.
Did any of that put you off though? I mean, were you always determined to carry on? There was no doubt you were going to carry on whatever was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, you get a bad injury, it takes you off, There's nothing you can do about that, is there? But the general day-to-day crap that goes, or the pain that goes with hiking, that didn't bother you at all.
Yeah, I think where my limitations come are when I know that I'm not physically capable of something, or I don't have the skills to do something, is where I'll pull back a bit and wonder if I should be doing it. But when it comes to like personal pain and like minor injuries and things like that, I am very stubborn and like would never want someone to be like, oh, I knew she wasn't going to do it.
Oh, gosh.
So I would just rather like be an absolute pain than be the person that gets off for the pain. So no, it didn't occur to me that, or it didn't push me away at all. It was just like, this is going to suck a little more than I thought it was.
But you embraced the suck and you got on through the desert and you got to Sierras, and that was a record year, I seem to remember, for snow, and which I presume means bad river crossings. What was that like, and what did you do about it?
That was like another big like punch in the face for me. I had never intended on flipping or skipping or doing any of that on my hike. I like almost laughed at the idea of it for the entire desert portion and planning. It just, other people were doing it. I wasn't going to. And then I got to the Sierra and we got to Lone Pine, and people we had been hiking with that we'd formed connections with were coming down from Bishop, that had hiked, Lone Pine to Bishop, and just the stories they were telling us about not even just the snowpack, but the river crossings. We had tried to time it perfectly so that we'd get there after the avalanches stopped, but before the snow bridges melted, because the best chance of me getting over a river is to just walk over it, not go through it. And what we were hearing from them is avalanches are still going, snow bridges are melted. So there was no window that we thought there would be that would be good for us to, have that safe passage. I actually met a guy up in Belden town who was in a story I had heard about in Lone Pine. This guy was on backcountry skis and got swept down in an avalanche. Jeez. And he flipped up to Belden town where we saw him in the bar, and he was sitting on a bench. He said he had called his mom and he was waiting for her to come get him. So it was just all stuff like that was happening. A guy who's a good foot taller than me, at least maybe a foot and a half, had told me there was a river crossing that was up to his thighs, and we were standing next to each other, and I was looking at his thighs, and that was where my belly button was. And it was just like, you start to lose your stability in water when you go above your knees, and then when you're above your waist, that's when you start floating in water. I didn't have a group at that time that I was super comfortable going into the Sierra with. My hiking partner that started the trail with me had just gotten off trail.
Right.
So I was kind of looking at it like, I have these friends, none of them are my specific group. I had my specific partner and she just left. Yeah. And none of it really seemed smart to me. And in my mind, you can't finish a hike if you die in the middle of it. So I flipped north, and it was just, I'm going to finish California. And when I get to the end of California, I'm going to jump back down, do the Sierra, and then go to Oregon and finish the trail.
Sure.
Got done with California, and the wildfires had started just behind us. And from there to Canada, we were basically just rushing every day to stay just ahead of them. So
wow.
no plans ever stay the way you think they will.
No, that's the great thing about hiking. You've got to be flexible all the time to do that. Mm-hmm. So were you always planning to come back the following year and finish, or did you think, that's it, I'm not going to come back now?
No, I planned to go back at the end of the summer. It was at the end of the summer when I wanted to go back, and then we finished on September 11th. And I calculated in the time it would take to travel back down, sure, and then the distance it would take to go through. It put me in mid-October, and again, it was one of those, you're not going into the Sierra by yourself in mid-October.
Yes, exactly.
Let's not be stupid. So I put it off till the next summer. Always had the intention of finishing it because it didn't really feel like the end when I got to the end.
Where did you actually finish then? Where did you complete the footpath all the way by filling in? Where did you actually finish?
Oh, I finished at the northern terminus. When we had left Lone Pine, we went up to Belden. People were going when they were flipping as south as South Tahoe if you wanted to hike through snow until you got to Belden. But that was, again, the area that I had worked in, and I didn't want to see it in that sort of a way. I didn't want to drive to it. Right. I wanted to hike up to it. So I went to the first town after Sierra City, which was Belden, and then from there to Canada.
But the following year?
Oh.
Yeah, when you finished the Sierras, where did you complete, as it were, the north to south run?
So I didn't go back the following year. I actually just went back this year. The following year, I was supposed to go back. I saved all my PTO at work. I took 3 weeks off in August. I bought the flights. I had everything I needed. And then the day before my flight, one of the forest fires that was happening in Yosemite closed a stretch of the trail, and the workaround to get around it would have caused me to miss about 150 miles. Wow. So it was just like, there's no point in doing all this if I can't even do it.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Put it off again, did the AT, and then just this summer I went back because the JMT. What is the JMT Conservancy?
I'm not sure what they call it now.
I think it's the JMT Conservancy. They weren't recommending you postpone your hike. They were allowing hikes.
And giving the permits out, were they? They're still giving the permits out, all right? Okay.
Yeah, and I was searching through the website. I was searching through the Facebook groups. No one was advising against it, so I took the time off work in August. And me and my friend that I met on the AT, the two of us drove out there, did it in one resupply. We went from Sonora Pass, which is just below South Lake Tahoe, and we went from there to Lone Pine through the Whitney Portal. So It was pretty much this, like the Sierra, the Northern Sierra is considered Sonora Pass is where the Northern Sierra ends. It's where you can leave your bear vault. You don't have to carry the bear canister anymore.
Right.
So it wasn't quite the JMT that we did this summer because we did stick to the PCT.
You did Whitney though. Did you go up Whitney? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was our last day.
I bet that was awesome. Yeah, I bet that was fantastic.
Yeah, it was really cool. Whitney was actually really nice because I had been told about these 99 switchbacks, and I thought that was to go up it. I didn't realize that was if you were coming from town. So the whole night at Guitar Lake was prepared to do 99 switchbacks in the morning. And I got to the top and was just like kind of confused as to why there was like, you look up as you're going up it, and eventually, it stops. You see the top and you realize you can't go up much higher. So where are these 99 switchbacks?
That's right. Yeah, they never came. Cool.
Yeah, so that was like the best surprise.
And for somebody who's clearly plugged into hiking, certainly since the PCT, obviously with the podcasting and so on, and you did the AT in 2019, same year as me actually, you were quite unaware of what the AT was like, weren't you? So why did you want to do that? Was that just part of being involved in the backpacking scene now?
I had no interest in it. People ask you immediately when you finish the first trail what the next one's going to be.
Yes.
They kept asking if I was going to do the AT, and I said I have no interest in it, which kind of scares me because I say I have no interest in the CDT now, and if anything goes the way it went, that's a warning sign of me eventually doing it.
That's right, yeah. So someone's not actually telling you then.
Yeah, I've said this before. I had no interest in doing it. I said not interested at all. I grew up on the East Coast. I've seen forests like that. Like, I know the areas it goes through in a lot of parts. I don't really care. And then I got a desk job that I hated. And it was just day after day of going to this job that just like sucks the life out of you. And you're just sitting there, and this is 2018, this is the year before, I'm trying to work through the summer because I'm trying to fill this gap on my resume where conveniently summers are missing.
Right, nice.
So I'm like, I need to survive at a desk for a summer. And I'm just seeing all my friends take off for other hikes. The guys I was hiking on the PCT were taking on new hikes. One of them was doing the AT. A couple other friends I knew were doing the AT, like different trails. And they're all posting like they're leading up to starting photos, their gear photos, they're taking off, like now they're on trail, and I'm just still sitting at this desk looking at it on my phone. Like it was like cry o'clock at noon every day, because I would drive to the parking lot of the grocery store and I would just sit in my car and cry for the hour and then go back to work and then work the rest of the day. Like that was my lunch break. And every day, like I'd call my friend and he'd be like, you can literally just come hike the AT. And so I had my 2 weeks notice and was like, if I can't do it, I'll just give it in and I'll go hike. But I stuck it out. I made it through the summer. I did the Colorado Trail, most of it in segments on the weekends to try to keep myself sane. And when you do 50 miles a weekend with a lot of driving, you really don't mind the desk on Monday. Yeah, you actually want the desk on Monday.
The logistics of that must have been a nightmare. I was thinking about when you told me the other day, you just basically did nearly 500 miles of the Colorado Trail at the weekend only. I mean, what's the logistics of that? What's the longest drive you had to do to get there?
I've had people like message me asking for tips because they want to do it that way. And like my biggest tip is absolutely don't do it. Like that is a terrible idea. I only kept doing it because I was so stubborn that at that point it was like, well, I've come this far and it's not snowing yet. So what am I doing on a weekend if I'm not doing this?
Yeah.
But no, it was terrible. It starts in Denver, it goes to Durango. Scenery was great. Everything about the trail was great. But the way I planned it was, it's right near where I live. I'll just do a segment or two every weekend over the summer. And then I'll have a long trail that I'm doing without quitting my job. And that was great until about Twin Lakes, Colorado. And once you go into the Collegiate West, it's a couple hours to drive the highways to the area. And then you turn onto the dirt road to get to the actual trailhead. And that's another like hour and a half.
I'm sure.
How slow you have to go over these rocks and all of it. So it was just, you'd pack for work on Friday with all your hiking stuff in the car, get to work on Friday, leave after work, start driving. In the beginning, we were lucky to get in like 9 miles on Friday night. If we could, we'd try to hit 10, but 5 to 9 was usually what we were doing, which would cut off some of it. But by the end of it, it was like we couldn't even get there in one night. We'd have to sleep a few hours, drive a little in the morning.
Jeez.
And then, it was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, don't do that then.
To answer your question, the longest drive times were, with everything, shuttling the cars, the side trails to the trailheads and back down and everything, about 13 and a half hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, the AT is a lot easier than that because you start at the beginning and finish at the end. So we were the second class of 2019. How lucky were we, to go that year as opposed to a year later? Was your preparation for that hike different from the PCT hike? And did you have to change up your gear much, or is PCT gear pretty much appropriate with the AT? And the reason I ask you that is I know that I watched some of your videos on your website, and you were bloody freezing in those first days. You had snow on the trees at the top of spring, didn't you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm just like a naturally really cold person. So that definitely didn't help. I did not prepare in the same way. I didn't prepare at all for the AT. My thought process was I want to go into this knowing as little about it as possible because it's going to look anticlimactic compared to the PCT. So the best thing I can do for myself to appreciate it is to just not see the views beforehand. Like, don't look up pictures of MacAfee's Knob. Don't do any of that. Just see it when I had no idea where MacAfee's Knob was. And then I found out we were going up it the next morning. And I was like, oh, cool. I didn't know where I was a lot of the time.
That's cool.
But it was, it was different too because it was like I'm not dealing with harsh elements. I'm not dealing with water carries in the desert or anything like that.
Easy
so
resupplies, things like that. Yeah.
Close bailouts. So I didn't really need to prepare the way I did for the PCT.
And you were more you said yourself, that the PCT gave you a confidence you didn't actually know you had when it came to that sort of thing. And you can carry that over into any other hike then, can't you? Because you know what you're doing, don't you?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between, before you do your first hike and before you do your second hike is it's really hard for someone who hasn't done a long distance hike before to kind of grasp the concept that instead of it being this huge long hike, like it's really just a short trip after a short trip after a short trip, and like the town kind of resets it. Like I've got 5 short trips coming up this month is kind of how I would think about it.
Someone told me that very first day. He said to me, you should treat the AT like 3 or 4 day hikes between stops in town. And that just had totally reset my mind. And it made so much difference to me personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to focus on your goal if your goal is to get 70 miles to the town rather than 2,000 miles to the terminus.
Yeah.
And it didn't bother me too much because it's like there's all these roads that go to towns in between this. So, if I run out of food, I'll take a road. If I get sick, I'll take a road. If I get bored, I'll take a road. Like, there's roads everywhere. So it's not really, there was no real reason for me to go into it with concern. My investments were in different gear for replacing things from the PCT that were too worn down to reuse. I replaced my sleeping pad with the same one, a Z-Lite, just because apparently I learned you're supposed to replace them because they wear down and lose their warmth. And then I replaced my backpack. I had been carrying a Mountain Laurel Designs Prophet on the PCT and then switched to a ULA circuit when I needed to add my bear can. I ended up going smaller for the Mountain Laurel Design Burn, which is the smaller size than the Prophet. I think it's about 38 liters.
Wow.
For the AT.
Pretty small. But you're right, you don't have to carry so much, you don't, and you're right, you don't have to have a bear canister. Yeah. I mean, I think I saw people on the trail with less than 10 pounds base weight,
that
which
was
is
me,
to me, amazing to me. I could never get to anything like that. And of course, by now you were podcasting. So I guess a lot of people knew you were out there at the time. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I felt this, but did you feel any pressure because of the podcast to keep going, or was that an entirely separate thing as far as you were concerned? You didn't feel that need to carry on going?
I didn't know, not because of the podcast. It was the same thing as the PCT, where it was just like my own personal stubbornness, where like, I'm not going to be the person that, I had the PCT on my shoulders. I got a lot of shit on my YouTube. Am I allowed to curse on this?
Yeah, I'll bleep it out if I want to.
Great.
I've got a lot of other stuff,
on my YouTube videos. When I bypassed the Sierra, just people who had been invested in watching me hike that were now pissed off that they wasted that time since it wasn't going to be a complete hike. You get a lot of like ultra purists on the internet, and I got more comments on
Who cares? Yeah,
literally.
Really.
But it was one of those things where it was like I had been hearing enough of it for so long that it was like I'm gonna finish a trail just to like shove it in their faces. Like I'm tired of hearing all this back and forth. Like you're not a real through hiker, this and that. Like shut up. So it wasn't even the podcast. It was my own personal stubbornness. It was the fact that like I'm so sick of all these terms for hiking. Like all these things combined was just like there's gonna have to be something really forceful to get me off this trail. Wow. Like if I didn't break a rib falling off a steep climb going up the Wildcats or something.
Easily done, by the way. Easily done, yeah.
And I was also moving at a fast enough pace where it was like I'm set to finish. I finished August 7th. If I needed to slow down, I had another. The thing with the AT is your weather window is so long. I could have slowed down for ages and fixed any type of injury I needed and still had time.
And I noticed you started with somebody and you finished with somebody. And because guys lose so much weight and change so much, it could be the same bloke. I've no idea. But it wasn't the same person you finished with as you started with, was it?
In my first video, that was my friend Peppa.
Peppa,
yeah,
right,
I guess. Yeah. So I found out that he was hiking the AT too. I guess we did start together. I always forget that. I found out that he was going to do a part as well, and he was looking for a ride to the trailhead, and I had someone volunteer to drive, which had been like great, and I knew he had room in the car, and I knew Peppa from the PCT, so I had reached out to him and said, hey, if you need a ride, we can hit the trailhead together. But the guy I finished with, I met him on day 3. Wow. He was one of the Treks bloggers. He had been a rower at Temple, so he was really strong, like strong legs, could handle miles, but it was still his first hike. So I met him at Blue Ridge Shelter, and we were just on the same pace. Like I was doing,
because you were putting in some pretty big miles pretty early on. You said last time you started with 12s or 14s, didn't you? And then we were up to 20s pretty quickly.
Yeah, my first day was 14, and after
Wow.
that it was 15 to 20. Our first 20-mile day was the day we hit 100 miles. So it wasn't very. It was the first week that I started doing 20s.
Amazing.
But he was the same pace, so we just stuck together.
I found out today, which I didn't realise. You decided, is this right? You decided to do the last 50 miles of the trail, which includes about 40 miles, 100-mile wilderness, I guess, in 30 hours to beat the weather to summit Katahdin.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, because the weather that you went up to Katahdin in was pretty crappy anyway, wasn't it? So, but doing 50 miles in 30 hours, how'd you do that?
I had no other choice. I wouldn't just like go do 50 miles in 30 hours like on a weekend. That's not something that I would normally push myself to do. But it was like choosing between two bad options. It was choosing the least bad
The least
option.
worst. The least worst,
So, yeah, we were projected to finish the trail on a Thursday, and then we were going to take the buses back to New York, and then my flight back to Denver was on Sunday.
Oh, right. So that was timed. Yeah.
So we were, pretty close, but we booked all this at White House Landing. So it was easy or not at White House Landing, excuse me, Monson. So it was easy to say, hey, this is when we'll finish. It's just a week, we can project a week out.
Right.
Get to White House Landing, and we get cell reception for one of the first times, and it's going to rain, and it's going to rain hard, and it's going to thunderstorm, and the weather is showing us it's going to start Wednesday afternoon, and this is Tuesday morning we're seeing this. It's going to start Wednesday afternoon, and it's going to go through to Saturday.
Wow.
And so in our minds, it's like, okay, the Rangers are going to turn us around if it's too heavy.
That's right.
Especially if there's lightning. And if we don't get to go up before Thursday when it starts, and we can't go up till Saturday, unless we're going up in really poor conditions, we're going to miss our flights.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That costs money to change them. We got to I lose my time having a weekend at home. There's a lot of stuff that ends up being given up because of that weather. And so we started hiking, and we get 5 miles in, and we're at this viewpoint, and we're looking back at White House Landing, and we're just like, this sucks. Like there's nothing we can do. This sucks. It's going to mess up all our plans. And we start walking down, and we're just walking in silence. And I don't remember which one of us propositioned it first, but we were like, what if we just don't go to sleep tonight, and we hike all the way there through the night, and then summit tomorrow morning, and then we don't fall behind? And kind of our mindset was same thing as viewing a trail in smaller chunks. Well, let's just see how far we get.
Sure.
Let's do the next 10 miles first. Let's get to where we want to get for dinner and see what time it is.
And you did actually actively speed up, did you? Did you feel you're speeding up, or you were going to put more hours in, that's all?
Maybe less breaks. Like we weren't going to take an hour-long break and just
right.
play with mud, like we were going to take a snack and eat it
Yes.
and go,
Yeah.
So we did that. We got to where we were supposed to have dinner. We cooked a dinner, waited for the rest of the group to show up, said goodbye. And then we were like, all right, let's just go 5 miles to Rainbow Ledges. Hiked the 5 miles there. All right, let's go 3 miles to this next waypoint. Did the 3 miles there. Okay, let's go. And the sun went down, and now it's pitch black. The moon's out, but we're just going 3 miles by 3 miles by 3 miles. And we got to Able Bridge. And between Able Bridge and I can't remember where it is, there's a section you can't camp in.
Well, in the park itself, can't you? You can't. You go through the park until you can't camp till you actually get there to the bottom of Katahdin, really, can you?
Yes. So we had made the decision then, let's sleep for 4 hours at this bridge. So we actually went to the Able restaurant, and we were like, we can't oversleep if we sleep in front of the front door. So we put our sleeping pads in front of the front door, went to sleep, and there were trucks going by, and it kept us at a light sleep, but it also kept us in front, knowing we were in front of the front door and didn't want to get caught being in front of the front door, kept us waking up when we wanted to, which was just 4 hours later, and hiked until the sun rose. We were crossing the bridge that has that Baxter State Park sign on it as the sun rose.
Oh yeah, I know.
Kind of delirious, through the time you're walking past that river. I had those little bugs flying and going in my hair. And the pictures are kind of rough from that part, and got to the base of Katahdin at about 9:30 a.m. Had another breakfast, and then just got up to the top around noon.
No wonder you look really exhausted in that video. You're filming yourself. You look absolutely wiped out. I now know exactly why. I mean, you must have been exhausted. But the funny thing is, one of the things that struck me when we spoke before was that, and I've never heard this from anybody else, you didn't feel much at all at either the northern terminus of the PCT and at Katahdin. You didn't feel anything that was good at all. That's really unusual. Were you sad that it was over, or just plain done and exhausted and you want to get home?
I think it's just like more of a personality trait of mine. Like, I never really like feel those big feelings at certain milestones. I don't know why. Like, I'm sure some therapist could probably debunk it, but I just like don't grasp it. I don't think. Like, my mind.
Do you feel when you reflect upon it later? Do you feel you reflect upon it later and then you attribute something else to it, or that's just a moment and you then move on from that moment?
When I look back on it later, it just becomes part of the whole picture, where it's like, that was a really fun trip. That was like a really cool thing to do. I miss it. I want to do it again, type of thing. But there's no real like overwhelming like sense of emotion, which I think is probably just something about my personality.
I was in tears both times. Silly old fool. I was crying like a baby. I don't know why. Now, and I know between the two main hikes, or the big hikes, you got involved in podcasting with Zach. Tell us how you got involved with it, because it didn't seem a natural fit necessarily. Why did you become that part of it?
Total accident. Well, not accident, just like luck. Right place, right time again.
Sure.
I had shown Zach how to turn on his camera before he went to hit the PCT the same year I did.
Skillful.
We high-fived as we passed each other in Timberline Lodge. And then like I went to 2 of the hiker meetups, and he had been like scheming the whole time. He had this idea for the podcast, wanted to do it, wanted a local co-host so that we could record in person.
Sure.
And I guess just like unknowingly I was checking the boxes. So he just called me after one of the meetups and pitched the idea. We went to a taco place and ate some guacamole and decided on it. It was.
And even though apparently you'd never heard one before, is that right?
Yeah, I hadn't listened to podcasts prior to that. I had to start to figure out what I was doing.
Do you enjoy it?
I think it's really cool. I like getting to talk to people that I never normally would talk to.
I agree.
Zach knows everyone. He has so many good connections through the trek, and just finds these people for interviews that are so fascinating. I've done so many amazing things, and just to be able to be in that interview and ask questions and talk to them directly is really cool. And it's one of those things that just fell together, and I'm grateful for it.
That's very cool. And now I will cut this next bit if I'm not meant to say it, but you did talk to me. You shared something with me the other day about something I'm not sure is public yet, a new project. Can you talk about that now or not?
Yeah, I can talk about it a bit. So I'm starting a new podcast. It's going to be hosted through the Trek. I don't know when I'm starting it yet, because it all depends on, the pace that we move in putting it together.
Sure.
But I'm working with a couple of people who are helping me with research, and it's basically going to be a super in-depth story about long distance trails. So each season ideally will be a different trail, starting with the Appalachian Trail. And it's going to go through episode by episode as the trail moves up. It'll go northbound because that's the direction most people will go. And as you're going through each area, it goes really in depth into the history of the areas. The history in terms of like people, and our history in terms of the land and the land's history and nature and all the flora and fauna.
There's a lot of research to do with that, isn't there?
Oh yeah. We've narrowed it down for the most part into seven main themes that we're going to go into. I'm going to try to remember them all off the top of my head in order, but the first one would be formation. They're all Asians, which is, I like that. Formation, which is focusing on the land, how the land was formed, how the mountains became what they are, how the trail became the land it is we see today. Habitation, so what inhabits the land, the flora, the fauna, what inhabited the land before us, the Native American tribes, the Paleo Indians, everything pertaining
You have
to
to
the
learn a
tour.
few new names then, aren't you?
We got over, yeah. Next would be
Another Asian.
no, it's before colonization. Something settlement related, but the early settlement, basically, when people started coming over. Colonization, when maybe it was colonization, when settlers are coming, taking over the land, pushing the Native Americans out, all the history there. There's actually a plaque at the NOC that says it's the official start of the Trail of Tears. Most people don't see that sign.
No,
It's
I
behind a
didn't see
giant
that.
Subaru chair. They put a giant Subaru chair in front of it. So just things like that, where it's like it can enrich your hike a bit, knowing that. From colonization on to industrialization, a lot of the trail was built because of the Industrial Revolution, introduction of railroads, transportation of goods.
You see
and
that
things
on
like
there,
that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Urbanization, which is basically people had access to automobiles in the home. It allowed them to go outside more, pushed them to escape cities and go explore nature. Big push for the trails coming about was, that increased interest. And then the last one would be conservation. So now that we're in present day, how do we preserve the land and make sure that we're treating it in a way that will keep it there for people who come after us?
Sounds a great project. What's it called? What's it going to be called?
Right now I'm thinking the Mile by Mile podcast is going to be the name of it.
Nice.
And then the guy I had hiked on the AT with had come up with a nice little sub name for it that he thought was fun, which was a self-guided masterclass.
Get you.
National trail system. So I don't know if I'll go with that part, but just a Mile by Mile podcast. That one Asian that I can't remember that comes before colonization is
it's going to drive you crazy. Don't worry about it.
Away.
It's another Asian.
Yeah. So in progress, working on it. We're mostly through Georgia right now. We've got a lot of really cool stories about like the wild hogs and how they came about and just the damage they're doing and how fast they populate. And
yes.
Like golden eagle migrations. There's a lot of cool information on ginseng in Georgia. There is a gold rush in Georgia, which is pretty much a huge reason for the Cherokees getting pushed out. The Creek tribes got pushed out mainly for cotton, but the Cherokees were mainly the gold. And just all kinds of history that people don't know that they're hiking straight through. And I think it would really enrich the hikes as well as create better stewards of the trail if we know more about the land we're going through.
So when do you think you'll be doing that, starting that?
I want there to be like a good
2023.
gap between
There's so much research to do.
I want there to be a good gap between what we're researching and what we're putting out. Because I really want it to be the best thing that I can put out. I would like to start putting out episodes in the summer.
Nice. Is this kind of a mini career? I mean, is this a part-time gig or a spare time gig for you in many ways, isn't it? You've got a full-time job, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I don't do well with free time.
All right. Clearly not. Yeah. Yeah. That's the fate of the podcaster. Now, I'm going to finish up. Oh no, I want you to mention your books. I only remembered it right at the very end. So tell us about your book, and then we'll finish up with something else.
Okay. So I wrote a book after I got back from the Appalachian Trail. It is called Hiking from Home, a long distance hiking guide for family and friends. Basically, I, throughout the years of interviews on Backpacker Radio and just being on different hiking pages, I knew of a lot of the books that are out there, and a lot of them are either stories of people's hikes that they've done, talking about their journey, or they're guides on how to hike. And you get question after question in the Facebook groups and on the podcast and in my emails and my DMs from people who are not the hiker themselves, but the parents or the friends or the family. I had people messaging me on the AT who were parents of the people I would hike near because they were just like so grateful to see something that let them know their kid was okay.
Yes, right.
It was just, I was noticing these people are buying the hiking guidebook to try to understand what the hiker's doing, but it's so much information that isn't relevant to them, that how much can it help? And I looked and I didn't find anything that was written for the people at home. So I wrote Hiking from Home, a long distance hiking guide for family and friends, to give a guide to the people from home on what to expect, what to prepare for, how to be helpful if they want to offer help, explained the basics of hiking, answered a lot of the common questions and fears and worries that people were having, did about 100 hours of interviews with
Wow.
hikers and people from home to get different perspectives that are included in quotes throughout. So yeah, just put together something that I think will be useful.
Well, I'll put a link. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. We're going to finish up now because we're running longer than I normally do. But you've got so many things you've done. But something I've introduced recently to the show, which may or may not work, and I'm actually going to change one of them because of you, is because I'm going to finish up with 11 quick questions about your AT hike. Just quick questions. They're quick answers. But before the first one for you will not be one I'm going to ask other people. PCT or AT?
Oh, they're so good in different ways. Can't pick. They're really good in different ways.
Can't pick's okay. Tent, hammock, or shelter?
Tent.
Maine or New Hampshire?
New Hampshire.
All right. Your favourite day on the AT?
My favorite what?
Day.
Oh, day.
D-A-Y. Sorry, it's my English.
Day. I don't know. You can't pick one day. There's so many days that have good parts.
There's certain things that well, the last guy had a big day, and he told us all about it, including women dancing for him, which was excellent.
Ooh.
We'll come back to it.
I hate picking one day. Yeah,
it's
I hate
that. least favourite day, when you really had a bad time. There must be a bad time you noticed.
Hamburg in Pennsylvania. I think it was Hamburg is the name of the place. Started with an H.
Just a bad day. We were just
in town. It was poor. It was dumping down rain on us. We'd gotten soaked trying to get from the grocery store back to the motel. Everyone's spirits were low. Yeah. That motel room was very, sad. There was talks about quitting from the people in our group, and we were just like, no, that's no longer an option once we pass halfway.
Yeah, not at this point. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just a low day.
Okay. Best view.
Best view. I really liked the views. It was leading up to the end of the trail in Maine. There were some really good views over ledges that had just like lakes.
Barren Ledges was my favourite with the lakes. Yeah, I loved all that. Best hostel you stayed at?
Best hostel I've stayed at. I'm going to go with a swerve on this one. I'm going to say Mountain Crossings. They have that bunk room hostel, which I didn't stay in. Yes. But I'm going to put them as my best one just because they were so merciful. I got there like late at night. It was supposed to go below zero that night. I had pushed 24 miles to get there to be able to sleep inside and not have to sleep out in 0-degree weather. The hostel was full, and the guy who worked there let me sleep on the floor of his room as long as I was okay with watching Anchorman. And I got to sleep next to a space heater, which no one in the hostel actually got to do.
I know. I remember that hostel very well, yeah.
It was very kind, yeah.
My guess is that won't be number one for a lot of people, but just so we go with that.
But for me,
merciful is a good thing to remember as well.
Yeah.
Your favourite meal on the trail?
Home Place. And I've heard that Home Place is closed now.
Oh, really?
Did you hear that? I heard
I didn't. No.
It's closed indefinitely, but
yeah,
Home
I loved it as well.
Amazing.
A meal that you're never going to want to eat again as long as you live.
Oh, anything cold soaked. I cannot cold soak things, and I sure tried.
Shoes or boots?
Shoes.
Okay. Did you filter all your water?
Yes.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm paranoid.
And lastly, did you ever deliberately sleep with your food bag as opposed to hanging or storing it?
Anytime there wasn't a bear can. Like if there was one of those bear vaults outside of the shelter where you put it in, or if there were the bear hooks in the Smokies, like if there was somewhere that you should do it, I would hang it.
What about hanging over a tree?
If we're like in the middle of Virginia, it's under my head.
Oh, good for that. Good for you.
For the most part, it's usually under my head.
Oh, dear, funny. Well, look, it's been lovely talking to you, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I love the idea of that show. So when you do get that show going, let me know, and I'll just tell people that this has started. I'm sure they'll know from your show anyway. But I appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
How about that? The last 50 miles in 30 hours. I simply couldn't comprehend even the thought of doing that. Good for her. And after we finished, when she was sending me pictures and links for my show notes, Chaunce remembered the other Asian. Apparently, between habitation and colonisation, there's exploration. And clearly, in the interest of completeness, she chose her best day. She wrote, "Oh, I remember. I always say it's the snow day in the Smokies. We got a bunch of snow one day and had a big fire in the shelter fireplace, and all our friends turned up. It was great." Thanks as ever to those of you who've donated to the Hiking Radio Network once more. Our monthly donors who've stayed with us for another month are Ann Dobson, Mike DiCello, oh, by the way, happy birthday for the other day, Mike, Terry Hackler, and Jenny Grunke, while William Matthews and Joe Barnett also contributed to the production of our shows. Thanks to one and all, I really appreciate your support. Remember, you too can donate with a monthly or one-off donation by clicking on one of the donate buttons on the hikingradionetwork.com website. I'll be forever grateful. Now, following a successful through hiker, a soon-to-be successful through hiker, no pressure there then, let's hear from Katie Westling or Phoenix Rising. Well, we're back on with Katie. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi, Steve. Doing pretty good.
Good. Well, you must be getting kind of excited now. It's not too long to go, is there?
It is not, and I'm starting to feel the strain a little bit.
Are you? No,
So
is that an excitement or is that nerves?
it's excitement and nerves, and I'm about to start something that I've been waiting a while to do and preparing myself to do, and it's here. Boom,
So-
right there.
So all the talk now goes out the window. It's actually doing what you said you were going to do.
That's right.
Are you finding it quite stressful?
Um, I would say yes, and it's challenging me to keep my head cool and calm. This weekend I drove my dog down to Florida to stay with my daughter, so
All right.
missing my dog, but was
Did-
glad to see my daughter.
Do you ever consider taking your dog with you on the trail?
No.
Really? Why not?
She's an older dog,
All right,
and
okay.
and I've never felt, and I'm sure some of your listeners may not agree with me, but this is something I like to do, and my dog might like to do it for about 2 miles and then
Yes.
take a nap.
Yeah, well,
so-
I thought that a lot when I was on trails. You see the poor old dogs. They
Yeah.
get their packs. They come to camp. They would have their packs taken off them. You could almost see them the next morning. As the packs went back on them, they're saying, "We're going again."
Yeah.
What's that all about? Because they have no idea. They've never heard a bloody Qatar. They have no idea. It's all this way off. So when you stand on that, you're going to weigh in, and you can do the approach trail, by the way.
I am going to do the approach trail.
Right, and you go underneath the archway, and you're suddenly on your own, for the first time. Are you anticipating that moment? Are you expecting to be emotional about that? Nervous or what?
I might be emotional. For me, I'm trying to keep it measured and treat it as I did my training hikes. Just
It's nothing like that. It's not.
I know, but I just want to. I'd like to see the falls. I want to see. I'm just ready to go and see what's out there.
Yeah, well, there's plenty out there. Don't you worry about that. You'll have plenty to do. And are you, you sound like last week. You've really got your gear dialed in. You know what you're going to take. Have you started to second guess yourself on anything at all, or are you just satisfied with what you have now and you're ready to go with it?
Well, I really think that I need to stay with it until I know different.
That's very sensible, and you should do, yeah, because some of it will definitely work better than you think it's going to, and some of it will definitely not work.
Yeah.
And you can only do that by standing there and accepting it. And I presume now, as everybody does when they're within 10 days of the hike, you're checking the 10-day weather forecast, aren't you?
Oh, I definitely am. So, and it looks like there's going to be some rain. Of course, it's spring.
Get used to that. Yeah, get used to that a lot.
So that's good. I'm really excited. I have a wonderful trail angel who is, she's dedicating herself to get me through Georgia.
Oh, wow.
I have a cousin sister friend living in Suches, and she's going to pick me up in Gainesville and take me to Amicalola, and then 1 or 2 days during the Georgia section, she's going to pick me up and I'll spend the night with her. And then I'll
Nice.
just have a chance to try to get more miles.
Yeah. You know what? I think it's really important to get yourself feeling comfortable. And if you need a day off, take a day off.
Right.
I saw somebody the other day on Facebook, of course, my perennial nemesis. I saw on Facebook the other day about somebody commenting on it about the number of zeros people take. Take as many as you want. there is no limit to the number of zeros you can have, and you'll enjoy them. Trust me.
If I need one, I'm definitely going to take it. I'm looking forward just to seeing Nancy, and she thru hiked several years ago.
Oh, cool.
And it inspired her to move to Suchess, Georgia.
Blimey.
So
can't imagine what it was about Suchess that would inspire you to move there. I'm not sure.
Well, she has her cute little cabin, and
nice.
And I'm just grateful to her.
I'm sure you are. So. You'll enjoy that. That is normally the first stop as well, so that's great. So talk about how you're tying up. You mentioned you've taken your dog to your daughters in Florida. How are you tying up the loose ends of your life before you go away? There's bills to pay and there's stuff to do and closing things down. How are you approaching that?
I'm a machine.
Right. I can tell. Yeah.
So no, I unloaded all of my house plants, some quite large, with my older daughter.
Right.
And
I would never have thought of that.
And yes, I have a lot of plants. I have to pack up. I'm still packing up my apartment. So movers come on Friday. That all goes into a storage unit. I'm trying to. I've put in orders to shut down all of the utilities.
Hang on. You're going, all your stuff's going into storage while you're away?
Yes.
If you don't mind me asking, why is that?
Because I'm renting an apartment. So,
how interesting.
So I don't know if I mentioned, I moved back to Virginia.
Yes, you did.
9 months ago.
Right.
And so...
so you're officially going to be homeless.
Hiking the Appalachian Trail sounds so much better.
That is awesome. Homeless has got. I was homeless for about a year. It's great.
I am definitely homeless. So putting everything in storage and getting my first vaccination tomorrow. So
well done. Good.
Very happy about that.
I bet, yeah.
Then I'm going to have to get off the trail around the 26th of March, toward the end of March. I'll need to get off and go get the second one, take a weekend and get back on.
That's kind of a bit of a drag, but you know what? That's okay. All those things are important. Definitely important. Yeah.
That's right. And I'm in Virginia, so I'm not it's not that huge of a drive. I'll just rent a car and do it. Nice.
Yeah. So you're going to tie up these loose ends. What are these final days going to look like? Are you ahead of the game now, or are you going to be basically sitting there on a fruit box in your apartment with nothing around?
I do a little bit each day, just still getting myself out, walking and playing on the hills and having fun with that. But also, I don't want the last day to be crazy. So
So what are these final days? You actually leave on Sunday, I believe.
I do. I take the train down Sunday evening, and then we'll start on Monday on the approach trail, and then take off the next day on the HE.
So now, as your home for the last 7 months has only been a temporary home, what are you actually going to miss from being at home? Is there something about the trail that because this is a long time to be not by yourself, but a long time to be living in a tent. So what do you think? What are you thinking about home that you're going to miss?
Well, that's easy. I'm going to miss my grandchildren and my 3 daughters. But I feel, this is why my daughters are amazing, is because they're so supportive of these crazy things I do.
Yeah, I bet they're rolling their eyes the whole time, aren't they?
My oldest daughter's already said, "Mom, this is going to be family lore. So,
Oh dear.
but no, they're pretty supportive of me,
That's
really.
very
And
cool.
they're my backup. My middle daughter will be sending me boxes as I need them.
Nice,
shoes
nice.
and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
gear, replacement gear.
I tell you what, I guarantee you're going to miss. You're going to miss flushing toilets. And you're going to miss showers, which haven't been inhabited by 50 people in the last 3 hours. You'll enjoy that. You're going to miss that a lot as well.
Oh, yes, I expect I will. But,
Yeah.
I actually, using the bathroom in the woods is sometimes cleaner than any other
Yeah.
option.
Yeah, good luck with
so
that.
that
Yeah.
part doesn't bother me so
Good,
much.
good. So what are you looking forward to in that first week on the trail? Because I bet now you really can't wait to get started, can you? You just want to
That's right.
get all the detritus of life out of the way
Exactly.
and get yourself into the woods. So what are you expecting in that first week? What are you hoping is going to happen?
I kind of really, this sounds crazy maybe, but I want to see how much the hills, the mountains are still in winter, and if there's any of the early signs of spring happening. Because once I start, we'll only be a few weeks outside of the start of spring.
Right.
So,
yes. And you know what, though? For me, maybe I'm not in the least bit observant, because basically you're looking down your feet most of the time to stop yourself falling over. But suddenly there comes a day when suddenly everything's open. It's like the whole plate, the woods is open for business.
Yes.
It's an amazing moment. So it's a lovely thing to watch out for. But you do see these tiny little shoots of spring every now and then. But of course, then you get some snow, and then it's all closed down again for a while.
Yes. And my experience in the spring in the mountains is you're walking in clouds.
Yes.
The fog, the clouds.
That's rather nice, though.
Very
Katie,
misty.
that
and I love
nice.
that. I do.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm looking forward. There's a little bird that I really love is the wood thrush. And it's the plainest looking bird, but it has the most amazing song. And so I'm looking forward to hearing that again. And
one shock for me, funnily enough, was on both hikes, funnily enough, was how quiet the woods were sometimes. You think it would be a cacophony of birdsong, but sometimes it's bloody silent. I mean, completely silent. and it used to frighten the life out of me, I tell you, because I think they're quiet because someone's around. Maybe it was me.
Well, that might, for me too, that quiet, it could be unnerving, I think. I like the sounds of the forest. So.
And talking of which, are you going to be listening to music or are you going to listen to the woods? Because I think the woods are great.
Yes. So one thing that I have found that like in the mornings and when I'm not super exhausted, I don't listen to anything. I just walk.
Sure.
I have found that when I'm tired and just trying to make miles, to put one earbud in, I'll listen to music or an audiobook.
That's nice.
Maybe a podcast I've downloaded. So I find that if I have to make miles and I'm tired, just one earbud in can distract that.
And also, Katie, your own thoughts, because you are going to find yourself thinking a lot. You're going to drive yourself bloody crazy. You will drive yourself crazy out there, unless you listen to something else, because you keep going on to yourself about how you could have done things differently. It's just not worth it, So you're an organisation person, I can tell from the way you're talking. Do you actually have, maybe I've already asked you this, I'm not sure, but do you actually have a spreadsheet, a schedule of where you're going to be at certain times?
I did do a spreadsheet, and I did it mainly to just let myself see, okay, what does 2,200 miles really look like?
It looks like a lot, I tell you.
So just to give myself an idea of what would be a baseline with no zeros. Of course,
yes.
My idea is I put the zeros in as I need them.
Absolutely.
But it was interesting. And of course, everyone who's done this trip says, oh yeah, you're just going to throw that thing out soon. And I totally believe it, but I'm a teacher, and teachers have plans, and
There you go.
and then they
Course.
throw them out the window when they need to.
Quite right too. Well, look, I'm excited for you now, and I know what these moments are like. You can't wait to get out there, and
Yes.
so I'm
Yes.
I'm hopeful that certainly your plans for getting to the trail work out, and then that once you get there, you enjoy it as much as you can. So you actually start on the Monday, or was it Monday or Tuesday?
I start the approach trail on Monday,
Right. Okay.
and then do the continue on the AT on Tuesday.
Great. Well, in that case, could you do me a favor and try to contact me on Wednesday if you get some get a signal, and we'll record your first report from the AT. So that'd be really cool. All right. Well, I got my fingers crossed for you. I'm hoping it's going to go well for you, and we'll speak next week hopefully from the AT.
Yay! Oh my gosh. Thanks,
Cheers.
Steve.
Cheers.
All right. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
I think that everybody's a combination of excitement, perhaps a little bit of doubt, maybe a bit of healthy wariness before they start a through hike. You want to do so well, but the reality of the hike starts looming in front of you, and the mileage becomes real. I think it's a pit of the stomach feeling that drives you forward quite a bit in those early days before you find your feet. I'm looking forward to hearing from Katie when she gets out there on next week's show. So now, let's hear from Maury Johnson. As you're going to hear, he immediately sets the agenda for our conversation, and it does limit the scope of what we could have talked about, but I found our conversation to be very worthwhile, and I think you'll get something out of this. Here's Maury. So today, instead of having somebody from the ATC, our guest is one of the more vocal opponents of the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and by extension, the deal that the ATC did with Mountain Valley. This is Maury Johnson. Hey, Maury, thanks for coming on the podcast to share your views.
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me.
Now, I invited you, I'll try and read some comments that you and others made about my interview with Andrew Downs from the ATC a couple of weeks ago. I'd far rather have everybody sitting around a table chatting and be able to listen in on that. But I'd rather not dive too deep into the weeds, because I want people to keep listening, obviously. But could you state the position that you hold, and I understand many other people hold, judging from both the petitions and comments that you kindly sent me, as well as some of the comments that I've read on Facebook?
Well, my position is I want to strictly talk about the agreement. I don't want to get into the debate whether the pipeline's going to be built or not going to be built, or should be built, or is a good thing or a bad thing. My position here is with the ATC and the way the agreement was reached.
Well, tell me about that then. How was the agreement reached?
Well, we don't know. That's the problem.
Okay.
My involvement with the ATC.
Would you normally expect to know? Would you normally expect to know?
Yes.
How the agreement was reached?
Well, because the ATC it's a unique nonprofit. It's not like all other nonprofits, and it has members, and it should be responsible to at least have told the members, especially those of us who worked very hard with them for over 6 years, trying to protect the view sheds of the ATC here in southern West Virginia and southwestern Virginia. So they should, all the time while we were still fighting to stop the pipeline from damaging the view sheds, they were, we say, secretly negotiating a deal with MVP. And it's sad that if you have lots and lots and lots of money, you can buy your influence by flashing some cash to somebody. And then everybody thinks, hey, they're a great company because they're giving all this money to whatever organization. I think as a member, and especially a member who worked very intimately with this project, with the ATC, that we have a right to see what they're doing. Just to clarify that they keep saying, well, it's not a bad deal. It's not a bad deal. Okay, I want to believe them, but I'm not going to trust anybody until I see the terms and conditions of the deal. I've heard lots of people say this.
For what reason? And the reason I ask you this is because I've been involved in lots of business. I've never been involved in a $19.5 million deal or even $1 billion deal like this. But certainly there are confidentiality agreements on some things. But to be fair to Sandy Morrow, she's not even arguing the confidentiality of things. And in fact, this wasn't the way in which I thought we were going to discuss this. I thought we were going to talk about the overall thing of the pipeline. But if you just want to talk about the ATC, you kindly sent me the letter. No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm happy with this. This is fine. You kindly sent me the letter that Sandy responded to you, your original letter to her back in, I think it was August, September 2020 after the deal. And talking about the agreement, this is interesting to me anyway. She says, I also would like to address your request to see the agreement. The policy of the ATC is that internal business agreements, regardless of the subject, are not shared outside of appropriate staff and officers of the organisation. This is true of all of ATC's transactional business agreements. But the more significant part is the other side, I think, the next page. It says, more to the point, however, is that the implication of your request is that there is some additional aspect to the agreement that ATC, MVP and TCF are not making public. I want to state unequivocally that the information in this letter and in the previous press release encompasses all aspects of the agreement. I'm also confident that as the ATC and TCF begin to carry out the important work in your area that this agreement will support, the integrity surrounding this intent will be clearly demonstrated. And I've got to say, when you sent me that, one thing I would like to say straight away is that you have been very diligent in making sure both sides, not so much are represented, but you've given me both sides of the argument, and I really appreciate you helping me with that and giving me a chance to read stuff. But when I read that, why would that not satisfy you? Do you think somebody's trying to hide something specifically?
I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know. We don't know.
Why would you expect? But why would you expect? Why would you expect to know? I've done agreements in the past. You don't tell everybody. Why would you do that?
To keep the confidence of the people who are members and who support the Appalachian Trail, including many trail club members. They're upset by this. There are, every day I hear more, as people learn more and more about this, I hear more and more outrage over the fact that it's secret. Now, I'm not saying there's any corruption here, but I'm not saying there's not, because we don't know. We don't know how this came to be, what was communicated between the ATC and the MVP. And I've had so many people say, well, how much money did so-and-so get? And I say, we don't know anybody got anything. And I'm not alleging that anybody got anything. But
some people are, aren't you? You've read online that so many people have started to say things like, and that's nonsense, to be honest with you, because there is an accounting that has to happen, and that accounting will happen, and all this money will be accounted for at some stage, and I'm sure you won't see a $500,000 bonus for anybody.
I hope not. I certainly hope not.
So do you have a suspicion then, Maury? I mean, is there a suspicion that something's happened?
I have an opinion that I won't make public right now, because I've looked at members of the board, members of the presidential leadership team. I have some questions I want to find out. Not that I think that anything has happened, but I'm not sure. And I think they talk about the credibility, they have a mission statement, and I think they violated that mission statement. It was actually in our press release by one of the folks who also is very close to this, talked about how they kind of betrayed the trust of the members, especially those of us that have worked so hard with them to try to protect the trail and the view sheds. The MVP could have done what Andrew, in his podcast, he talked about all the number of pipelines and utility lines and how everybody had worked with them. Some of those pipelines and utility lines were probably there before the ATC really became what they are. But they all worked with the ATC. They went above and beyond to try to not impact the trail. And it was not true with this pipeline company. They wouldn't even talk to the ATC for a year.
I know. But
So
things changed. Things changed, didn't they?
I don't know. They changed because they somehow said, we got a bunch of money. We will try to give you this money. A lot of that money is not going to be used around the MVP pipeline. It's going to be out there to buy land in other places that's going to protect the trail, maybe in some other areas of.
That's right.
Okay, but here's an example. So this area here where the pipeline crosses was land that the Forest Service kind of coerced people in selling, and in some cases actually took it through eminent domain in order to, and it explicitly says in some of the deeds, to protect the ATC. There's not much way they could, just buying land doesn't protect the ATC if another pipeline company or another utility company just wants to come and wave a bunch of money and say, we're going to come through there. I think that
I'm not sure what's your point there though. What point are you actually making there then?
They're not protected by buying this land. They're not really protecting anything if somebody else wants to do what MVP has done.
Well, they're kind of up. Well, I suppose the way in which I've looked at all the information you sent me, and I appreciate that, but it boils down to me that from what has been said to you and because I listened again to my own interview, and I hate listening to myself by the way on podcasts. I listened again to my own interview with Andrew today, and really he was talking about the case of the impacts that have already been. He knows impacts have already been felt, and he knows that they made their opposition to this pipeline in 2016. But he said the thing that has changed so much of the pipeline and the things they were objecting to and the views and so on have gone into the ground. It's there already. So a lot of those impacts are there. And I suppose they're taking the money, that they're seeing an opportunity where they can preserve more of the extra parts of the trail, especially around Virginia, using that money around Virginia to improve other parts of the trail. And they've already seen a benefit because the recent purchase for about $1 million of 600 acres to preserve the views around MacAfee Knob. I would have thought that was a good thing, wouldn't you?
It's tainted money. There's a lot of companies that will give donations to people to use that as PR, that they're a great company and they're going to do it just stinks to a lot of people that this happened. I'm not saying it's a bad deal. I'm not saying it's a good deal. I just think, and many other people think, that it should be made public, or as much as possible, should be made public to reaffirm to the trail community, those people that's wanting to protect the trail or has a better sense that it wasn't a shady deal. And there's a lot of people who feel that way. I don't know how I feel about the deal.
Yes, Maury, but they may feel that way, but feeling doesn't work these days. You've got to know something. And they don't know anything at all other than what they've been told. And she was absolutely unequivocal about this. There is nothing more to that agreement. Now, she would not be able to sign that. The board would hold her to that, were that to be the case. There's no way. I think people see conspiracy everywhere, and I think these days, but there's no way the board would allow her to sign a letter like that if it were not true. There's just no way, is there?
I don't know.
Why would they? They're a non-profit, and there's. I mean, my personal view about this, and I'll probably say it after we talk. But my personal view about this is, I tend to take her at her word with this letter. And certainly she will be held to account if there is something additional to this agreement that comes out eventually. And, I'd love to see it as well. And I think in many ways their PR has been awful over this. I think if they'd actually said, we have a confidentiality agreement, we cannot reveal this, that would have been easier in many ways because it would have been, but she didn't hide behind that. She said what she said. She said, this is the entirety of the deal. And and I know I've had ATC on my show for the last couple of months and so on, and each one of them is as passionate about the AT as you are, and I think they've tried their hardest to do the best deal they possibly can for the AT, but for you to say that people are coming on with their feelings and saying they feel there's something wrong, that's reflexive almost, to believe that, you know, someone is giving over their responsibilities to another organization. And in this case, I don't think that's true personally. But if you've got evidence to the contrary, tell us what that evidence is.
I don't have any evidence because they won't show us the agreement.
But they say they don't share those agreements. Have you seen any other agreement they've revealed have you seen anything that contravenes what she says there, that they don't share agreements to other than officers and directors of the company? Because I suspect that's true as well. They don't do that.
This is the first time that I've ever seen them even issue a press statement about something like this. This is an unprecedented. This is different than any other agreement that I know that they've ever had and it may be true that that's their operating procedures, but this is it's different than anything else they've ever done.
Yeah,
as far as I know,
everything's different.
Yeah.
And I suppose really,
go ahead.
You go. Sorry.
It also sets a precedent for the Pacific Crest Trail and other trails around the country on how they deal with these companies. The problem is,
I don't think it sets any precedent at all. Absolutely none. Because the ATC can only do certain things. This has to go through a court, and as I understand it, the Full Circuit Court of Appeals made the judgment that Mountain Valley had fulfilled their obligations under the deal. So I'm not sure what one could do.
Well, the Fourth Circuit didn't rule on this deal. They ruled on a Forest Service case in 2018.
That's right.
In 2018, which I was a declarant on. And I've been I've been busy on other things. I'm going to go back and try to read, because I don't remember anything in that particular court case that dealt with the ATC. Now, I could have missed something, and I want to go back and read it again. And I do know that the case representing the ACP case that was held last year, which I was at the Supreme Court, said they could cross the trail, but also they had a certain way they had to cross the trail. And I don't think that
sure.
I don't think MVP has done that. But that'll be a different case down the road sometime, maybe.
Yes.
There's lots of court actions going on. One thing I'm hurt by is the fact that they took MVP's word that the pipeline was so far completed and it was already a done deal. It's not a done deal. They actually changed their narrative when they had to step in front of a court to say how much was complete. I don't think anybody's held them account for that. I know that I was out over the weekend driving. I was out about 5 hours in West Virginia. There's lots of pipe on the ground, still out of the ground. The most difficult parts of their project is due. I'm really hoping that we stop the pipeline, ACC gets to keep the money, and then we find out how it was reached.
Well, you know what? That would be rather nice. I agree. So what is the end game for you and your opposition to this? Do you think the pipeline will or won't be completed? And it is really, you came on, you said straight away, all you wanted to talk about was the letter with the ATC, and you've made your case. Sandy has disagreed with that. It's her right and responsibility on behalf of the ATC to act, which the way they think is the right way to do things. What's the end game for you in this?
Well, it's not an end game for me per se. It's the end game for the many people who felt this was done wrong. We'll find out. It may take a year. It may take 6 months. But we'll find out if the way they conducted this was okay. And I'm sure that there are other people who have a lot more authority than me that are interested in what happened here. So it'll take several months. It may be that Sandy and the board, what they did is perfectly fine in the eyes of the authorities. It may be that maybe they decide it's not. I want to know. I want to make sure that if I work with the ATC on something else, that 2 years down the road, they don't just kind of blow us off and change courses or something. It's just very frustrating that we would work so closely with them. They could have said, we've got this thing going, of course they have to do confidentiality.
Maury, you can't negotiate in public. You can't negotiate in public. You really can't. You know, that's unrealistic to negotiate in public. In my view, if your view is different, that's fine. And maybe you have a special place with the amount of work you've done here, because there's no question you sent me a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of work being done to try to stop this. But it's not reasonable to suggest anybody can negotiate a $19 or $20 million deal in public, in my opinion. But look, you know, I'd love you to come back on if you learn any more about this, and you do hear any more. And you know, and I do appreciate you coming on and talk to us about it. And I was going to talk more about the pipeline itself, but you know, this is the issue now is about, and certainly the online issue is about the ATC and how they've managed it. And I do agree. I don't think they've necessarily handled it as well as they might have done. But you know what? I think that letter, when I got that from you, that to me was sufficiently explicit to at least give me some comfort. Not that anybody cares what I think, but to at least give me some comfort that they are acting honourably and with integrity. And I know some people reflexively see any deal with any energy company as a wrong thing, and that cannot be the case going forward in a country that needs energy. So you know, that's the way that goes.
Like I said, everybody has their own opinion of what was right and what was wrong.
Sure.
And everybody has.
Well, I respect you for coming on anyway.
And I, like I said, I'm going to continue to try to find out how this came to be and what's the contents of it. I may be successful, I may not be, but I will continue to pursue this issue. And thanks for having me.
No, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks very much indeed. Bye then.
Goodbye.
Bye. By the way, I said that the Fourth Circuit Appeals Court said that MVP had met their obligations under this deal. I meant the building of the pipeline and not the deal with ATC. My bad, but I don't think it changed the tenor of our chat. Well, you've heard Maury, and I think you can see where I came down. I thought that Sandy Morrow's response to Maury was concise and addressed the issue. It wasn't what he, and many of you, would have wanted to hear, but it was the position of the ATC. I'd rather take you back to the end of my interview with Andrew Downs a couple of weeks ago, when I asked him if he was comfortable that the deal that ATC had signed with MVP was in keeping with the Benton Mackay statement and the objectives of the ATC. He thought that it was. Personally, having seen zero evidence of any malpractice or corruption, and having read a lot of papers from Maury, I think that the ATC didn't sell out. They simply saw a situation whereby the trail could benefit as a whole, and they took the opportunity to avail themselves of that benefit. The pipeline, in many cases, was well into the ground by then, so the damage had been done. Some of the nonsense online has been vitriolic, and I'm afraid only served to underline that many people see entirely the same issue from an entirely different perspective. I mean, really, haven't we had enough of that in the country for these past few months? Tell me what you think. If you have something more to say, feel free to write to me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com or leave me a message through our website. And just before we get on to Larry Luxembourg's Walking the Appalachian Trail, I wanted to take a moment to thank those of you who took the time to write to me about the mini sabbatical that I'm going to be taking from the show during this summer. This is not permanent, and I'll be on the show with Ryan as the host every single week, and I'll be doing one of my shows every month. Now, let's hear from the old, the blind, the injured, and the infirm who've taken on the AT over the years. I'll see you next week. Ramblin' Rose and Sourdough Bob. Elderly and handicapped hikers. In the woods, too, a man costs off his years, as the snake his slough, and at what period soever of life is always a child. In the woods is perpetual youth. Within these plantations of God, a decorum and sanctity reign, a perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. Ralph Waldo Emerson. The Great Divide is 60, according to Rowley Muser, who hiked the trail at 66. It's tough for someone over 60 to through hike in a single season. Older hikers average only 10.5 to 11 miles each hiking day. From age 20 to 60, the average is 14.5 miles. Because of lower mileage, it's hard for older hikers to finish the trail without hiking through big snowstorms or other treacherous weather. At 60, it would have been a blast, said Grandma Kay Wood, who eventually hiked the trail at age 70 in 1988. I couldn't do it now, she said in 1993. I do still backpack, however. I think I'm lucky. So many people would like to do it. Most people don't have the time. You're awfully lucky if you have the time. A slender, cheerful woman, Kay Wood's involvement with the AT spans 40 years. The trail used to run right by her house in Dalton, Massachusetts. Last summer, at 75, Kay was a volunteer ridge runner along the Massachusetts AT, helping and educating hikers. By early June, she had already covered the route twice. A trail shelter not far from Dalton has been named in her honour, and she has been vigilant in making sure it's in good shape. Kay eased into trail work after she began backpacking with her son in the late 50s. She noticed places where logging caused difficulties on the trail. She tried to have those situations corrected, even though she wasn't involved with any hiking groups. In the early 70s, she began maintaining an AT stretch near Dalton and became a volunteer coordinator. In her spare time, she climbed the 100 highest peaks in New England. With her children grown, she sold her big house, and then it seemed like the right time to hike the AT. Over the years, she'd talked to many thru hikers, which had given her an itch to hike the trail. She'd done stretches of it before, but she thought it would be fun to do the whole trail. She hurt a knee in Virginia and panicked, thinking it was badly injured. After recovering, she came back in the fall and hiked Maine and New York. The following summer, she did Virginia through Pennsylvania before developing shin splints. She completed the trail in the fall. I'd never been in the South before, and I enjoyed seeing so many wildflowers, and the colours of the azaleas were so beautiful, Kay said. As a lone hiker, the only thing she feared were stream crossings, which can be icy cold and slippery, with swift currents that make it easy to lose balance. I loved Maine, all except the stream crossings. I picked August to hike there, thinking it would be dry, but there were a lot of thunderstorms and the streams were high. I fell in a couple of times in Maine, where a couple of young hikers just bounced across. In one place where the water goes over a dam, the other side is deep, up to your neck. I yelled for them and they grabbed my hand and pulled me out so fast hardly anything got wet. I walked fast until I got to the next shelter and dried off. Farther north, I fell in face down and couldn't raise myself. I gave a big push and got myself out. I had a big bruise on my leg. I was finishing up a section and getting tired, and I would fall more. Kay carried too much weight but couldn't seem to trim her load. I didn't carry anything I didn't have to, she said. Much of the time she carried a 2-week supply of food, since she avoided hitchhiking. At the start, she hiked 5 or 6 miles a day until she worked into shape. Later, she did 3 straight 20-mile days on a rocky stretch in Pennsylvania. It was a mistake because she hurt her legs there. She just felt good and wanted to keep up with some younger hikers. It was stupid, but you get psyched up, she said. I was feeling cocky. Her only injuries were shin splints and problems with her knees, nothing serious or permanent. She was never sick, though she did meet several hikers who were ill from bad water. It's a nuisance to treat water, but it's worth it to not get sick, said Kay. I liked being alone, she went on. While I walked, I wrote long letters in my head, and then when I'd get to the shelter, I'd be too tired to write them down. I thought about my kids, but I wasn't homesick. I was perfectly happy where I was. There was so much to see. A lot of hikers don't see what's close to them, the different types of trees, flowers, birds and things. Grandma Gatewood stayed at my house in the 60s when she went up to the long trail. My girls were little then. I recognised her as she was hiking past. I asked if she liked lemonade. She said she wasn't going much farther, so I asked if she'd like to stay. She had a little duffel bag and carried very little. She had a can of corned beef and just ate cold things. She had bunions and spent a lot of time washing her feet. It's impressive when anyone does the whole AT, but it's positively remarkable that so many elderly and handicapped people have hiked the 2,000 miles. Most remarkable of all was the feat of Bill, the Orient Express, Irwin, the blind hiker who in 1990 did most of the trail alone except for his guide dog, Orient. No one on the trail that year could complain about much of anything without feeling sheepish. No matter how hard it was harder for Bill. Yet, according to those who met him along the trail, Bill retained his equanimity in the face of thousands of falls, a broken rib, dreadful mix-ups, getting lost and frequent danger. Even through hikers who can see are often poised on ridges, one step from oblivion, or climbing over barbed wire fences, or crossing streams on jagged stepping stones. A deeply religious man, Bill often said he was doing the trail to demonstrate his faith in God. Certainly, though, the trip also amply demonstrated Bill's courage, determination and persistence in the face of seemingly insuperable obstacles. Arthur, AB positive Batchelder, who helped Bill in Maine after finishing his own through hike, worried about Bill's safety in the cold fall weather. Arthur finally insisted on helping Bill around some stream crossings in late October, fearing that Bill would die of exposure. Arthur and Peter, Mr. Moleskin, Martell, also helped to locate Bill on Avery Peak, where he was stranded by a big snowstorm. In one day, he could fall 100 times, Arthur said. His legs were just big scabs. None of us could ever complain that year, said Luke, the journeyman Wiachik. We couldn't say we were having a hard time or we fell. Bill would come in and his legs would be bruised and bleeding. He had no way of getting around it, but he was always up. He was definitely an inspiration to anybody. It was challenging enough for me, said Connor Carolina Cooker's Coward, who hiked some with Bill. I have no idea how he did it. If I hadn't seen him do it myself, I wouldn't believe it. Ranking high among the most courageous and impressive hikers is Bob Barker, who has multiple sclerosis and through-hiked with crutches and a heavy pack. Bob hiked the whole trail not once but 3 times in the 80s, and he, too, hiked alone. Like his friend Bill Irwin, Bob displays tremendous determination. He has endured his share of falls and broken bones. Bob, too, is now blind, but he's continued to hike. I don't know how he does it, 3-time 2,000-miler Bert Gilbert said. The first time I met him, he was going up out of Kinsman Notch in the White Mountains. He was using these 2 arm braces and he was humping along. He carried an awful lot of stuff. He must have been carrying 75 pounds. Bob has hiked the trail in both directions. On his second trip in 1983-84, at age 63, he spent 182 nights on the trail, averaging 12 miles a day, with the longest of 26.5 miles. He wore out 6 crutch tips along the way. Among the handicapped people who have done the trail, Jeff Lubman, who is deaf, Mike Goodess Shank, who lost part of his stomach and other organs to cancer, and Jack Eshelman, who had a hip replacement. The oldest man to have hiked the trail, Ernie Morris, started when he was 82 and finished at age 86. He continued backpacking until age 92, when he hiked more than a week on the John Muir Trail in California's High Sierra with fellow 2,000-miler David Lipsky. They left the trail when bears stole their food and destroyed their packs. Ernie died the following year, 1982, at age 93. He started his AT hike at Springer in 1972, but stopped at Rockfish Gap, Virginia, because of Hurricane Agnes, which devastated much of the Mid-Atlantic states. He returned to the AT in 1975 and finished 6 months later, 3 months after his 86th birthday. According to his daughter, Margaret J. Morris, in a letter to the AT News, he loved every minute of it, even the scary parts, and always referred to it as the greatest adventure of my life. David Lipsky wrote that Ernie used to say, "If you make demands on your body will respond, within limits." Paul Bigfoot Torini met Ernie Morris at Mad Tom's shelter in Vermont in 1975. Paul was doing the long trail with his nephew, John, and Ernie was finishing the AT. Paul asked Ernie how old he was and was just amazed to hear he was 86 years old. He was even more amazed to find out that Ernie's pack was as heavy as his own. Ernie generally kept his pack between 40 and 45 pounds, about 1/3 of his own weight. When he started the AT, Ernie also carried a 14-pound duffel bag. Ernie believed in keeping in shape with proper diet and exercise, including exercising his mind. To do so, he would memorize things. That night, he kept Paul and John enthralled, reciting from memory Robert Service's poem, Dangerous Dan McGrew. Paul found Ernie methodical about his routines and disciplined about hiking his planned mileage each day. Ernie was then living in Independence, California, at the base of Mount Whitney. At that time, he was the oldest person to have climbed 14,495-foot Mount Whitney, a feat he accomplished alone at age 90. Paul has a picture of Ernie that same year climbing a tree to prune it for a neighbour. After his first wife died in 1959, Ernie's blood pressure rose to 170. To lower it, he began hiking and climbing in the California mountains, eventually dropping it to 125. Before he did it, Ernie had been planning to hike the AT for 25 years. A lot of people are always thinking about what they're going to do, Ernie said. I believe in making the most of each day, every hour and every minute. You can't live tomorrow. You must live today. When he died, his ashes were scattered on the high Sierra trails that he loved. Dr. Frederick Luring hiked the trail in stretches and finished in 1963 at age 81. At that time, he was the oldest person to have completed the trail. Before hiking the trail, Luring had a lifelong record of involvement in athletics. He played guard on the University of Chicago football team under legendary coach Amos Alonzo Stagg, just at the time the forward pass was being developed. He was Princeton's first basketball coach and was an athletic director of the universities of Nebraska, Minnesota and Pennsylvania. A member of the International Swimming Hall of Fame, Dr. Luring was the secretary of the American Olympic swimming teams for the 1932 and 1936 Games. He hiked the AT over 15 years, walking only in the summer. Dr. Luring died in 1981 at age 99. Until a few weeks before he died, he walked daily, swam regularly, and chopped firewood. I walk to live and I live to walk, he often said. At 92, he led a 20-mile walk. At 87, he was picked up by the police as he hiked the long trail. They thought he was too old to be there alone, but friends convinced the authorities otherwise. Gordon Old Man Gamble hiked the AT at age 66 despite arthritic knees. Gordon, who thru-hiked in 1980, paid his pack weight mercilessly. He planted a half-dozen food caches in the south, keeping his pack light while he adjusted to the trail. He even wore heavily padded sneakers to lower his shoe weight. In his trail report to the ATC and the AMC, Gordon wrote, "The trail turned out to be quite difficult, much more so than anticipated. Had I realised that, in ascending and descending the 163 mountains along the trail, the footway would be so rough due to roots, rocks, boulders and ledges, I doubt that I would have ever started. But," he concluded, "overall, I consider my first major retirement project a considerable success. I will cherish the memory of prolonged outdoor living in one of America's great wilderness areas. I also derived tremendous satisfaction from finding that I could cope with difficulties as they arose." Ramblin' Rose and Sourdough Bob Goss of Michigan were nearing retirement. They had been acquainted with the AT for years, backpacking and car camping along the trail. "One year we started talking about doing the AT," Robert explained, "and we said, we'd better do it now if we're going to do it. The only time we'd get discouraged was at night when we get to the shelter. We'd be bushed and ask why in the world we're doing it. In the morning, we'd wake up refreshed and answer, because we're enjoying it so much." "We were doing it our way," Bob added. "We went a little slower than most people. That way, we got to hike with a lot of people for a few days. By the Whites, we were as tough as nails and felt great," Rose said. "It was quite emotional to see Katahdin from the trail for the first time, to see the last mountain after you'd seen so many." 9 thru-hikers finished on Katahdin the same day as Bob and Rose. Chuck Woodchuck Wood borrowed an American flag from the Monson post office and carried it to the top. "Strangers cheered," Bob said. "It was quite a feeling. We fell in each other's arms and cried like babies. Neither of us is the crying type. Surely it was a feeling of joy." Before the trip, people would ask, "What do you expect to get out of that?" You can't really tell them. If you ask the question, you won't understand the answer. You have to have a feeling for the trail. Some of these things are hard to put into words. It was the most fantastic thing that we did in our life. "I don't think you're ever the same people after hiking the trail," Rose said. "You realise what's important and what isn't. For 6 months you get by with minimal clothing and food. You realise you've weighted yourself down with a lot of unimportant details. You start to appreciate the little things in life. You enjoy everything from a little bug climbing a leaf to a big grouse taking off. Nature is really what counts. Man-made things are not that important." Tom, the Pennsylvania creeper Thwaites, hiked the trail in 1990 after retiring as a physics professor from Penn State. The author of several Pennsylvania hiking guides, he said, "I was obsessed with mileage all the time, and that's a mistake. But I knew this was my one chance to do the AT, and I wanted to make sure I'd do it. I was surprised at how tough the South was. There were no flat places until Watauga Lake in Tennessee. I was surprised at how tough Maine was too. Over the last decade, the AT has been moved from logging roads and relocated onto mountains, making the trail better but harder. In Maine, near constant rain made the trail slick, and Tom fell every day. The roots were slippery, the leaves were slippery, even the rocks were slippery. There was no place safe to step, he said. I had big bruises for months afterward. Reverend Henry Chaunce pieced the trail together, finishing in his early 70s. An inspiration to younger hikers, he could be heard introducing them to Shakespeare or the philosophers as he travelled the trail. Strong but frail-looking, he exemplified how well hikers of all ages seemed to mix on the AT. If younger hikers mature during a through hike, then older hikers must become young. Offshore Steve Gomez, who is in between young and old, said that during his 8 years as a commercial fisherman, while still in his 20s, he felt old. Now, as a hiker, he feels young. Perhaps that's enough benefit for anyone. Profile: Dick, the old Hawaiian mountain goat, Davis. Exercise the body and it glows with vigour. Exercise the brain and you stay alert. Exercise the senses and enjoy all Mother Nature has to offer. Open your heart and let in the sunshine of love for living and for those living, and you feel serenity. Richard Davis, the old Hawaiian mountain goat. In late April 1983, I took my wife, Frida, on a first backpacking trip, a circuit of the Eastern Smokies. It had rained for weeks and snow was still deeper at higher elevations. Frida fell into a creek once and almost drowned and was either drenched or frozen much of the time. One night, we stayed at Cosby Knob Shelter. A backpacker, Dick Davis, then 62, was the first to join us. He was in more pain than any hiker I've ever seen. Frida, an emergency room nurse, marvelled that he could hike at all. Possibly no one has a more apt trail name than Dick the old Hawaiian mountain goat Davis. Stubborn, resilient, stoic, he thrived where many others would have found the going impossible. Despite lifelong encounters with severe adversity, he cheerfully recounts his many adventures in a matter-of-fact delivery that belies his dramatic brushes with danger. After completing the Pacific Crest Trail in 1980-81, he turned to the AT in 1983. Less than a month into his hike, he was walking near Clingman's Dome in the Smokies in 18 inches of snow when he slipped and twisted his knee, tearing muscles and ligaments. The next day he limped down the road and hitchhiked into Gatlinburg. In town, a policeman pulled him over, and soon he was surrounded by 6 police cars. They searched him and questioned him. A man had been shot nearby, and Dick matched the description of the murderer. Finally, they realised they had the wrong guy. After being cleared, Dick rested in town for a few days before returning to the trail, but the knee still bothered him a lot. North of Hot Springs, he met a young man walking toward him. "Are you Dick Davis?" he asked. It was his nephew, and his brother was waiting at the road. So Dick spent a few weeks recuperating in his brother's home. "Knees take a long time. It's still recuperating," Dick said a decade later. From Pennsylvania, he flip-flopped, skipping 600 miles of trail by taking a bus to Woodstock, New Hampshire, to visit his boyhood haunts. He used ski poles to support his still troublesome knee. On Wildcat Mountain, his knee acted up again, and he rested another week. He stayed overnight in a cabin in the Maine wilderness. On the trail the next morning, he felt pains inside of both arms, which soon passed down his trunk. "I knew I'd had a heart attack," he said. He lay alone on the trail for 12 hours, propping his feet up and reading and writing poetry. That night, he made it to a nearby ridge and camped. In the morning, he saw a seaplane landing on a lake, but when he reached the lake, no one was there. He went back to hike the trail, and 5 days later, he was at the base of Katahdin. "It was such a beautiful day. I left my pack at the ranger station and started up," he said. On the way, he felt angina pains, which slowed him. Even 12-year-olds were passing him, but he eventually did make the summit. The next day, he caught a bus to Portland. He was in such bad shape that he didn't realize where he was until he reached the end of the line in Boston. The bus company let him ride free to Portland, where he was hospitalized for 12 days. At first, the doctors didn't think he'd had a heart attack. After hiking the PCT and much of the AT in the past 3 years, he performed a stress test better than anyone there. An EKG showed nothing, but an angiogram showed a coronary artery 100% blocked and another 80% blocked. "They didn't see how I could walk across the room," he said, much less hike the AT. In November, he had quadruple bypass surgery. In 1985, he returned to the trail in New Hampshire. Hiking south from Mount Moosilauke, he became exhausted in the ice and snow. For a time, he was vomiting every few hundred yards, but by the time he reached Hanover, he was better and able to complete his hike. Asked whether he ever thought of dropping off the trail, the answer was a quick and emphatic never. He added, "Pain has never bothered me. I grew up with it. As a youth, he had severe migraines, one after the other. At age 14, he lost his right eye. At 16, he cut off half his right foot when he fell into a lumber saw. His next major trauma occurred in 1950 in Hawaii, where Dick still lives. With a friend, he hiked up a ridge behind Schofield Barracks, and they filled their packs with wild oranges. Failing to make it back by dark, they spent the night huddled under a poncho. Descending the next day, they found a climbing rope in place. Dick said, "I tested it 4 or 5 times, but didn't go to the top to see if it was tied." It wasn't, and he fell 400 feet, landing on his back with the pack of oranges helping to break his fall. Even so, he blew out 5 vertebrae, smashed his spinal cord, and received assorted injuries. He lived, but still has constant back pain. He also had more than his share of accidents on the PCT. After picking up his mail near Mount Shasta, California, he was hit by the outside mirror of a potato chip truck, suffering a concussion. "It slowed me up for a while, but I went back to the trail and kept going until the weather turned bad," he said. Later on the PCT, he had a backpacking stove blow up and sat on an anthill. He had to plunge into an icy stream to rid himself of the ants. Dick grew up on a small farm in New Hampshire where his father worked in a paper mill. Dick worked on the farm before school, in the evenings and on weekends. When he was as young as 13 and 14, his dad would place him in jobs working with the lumberjacks. The only way to get away was to run into the Lincoln Wilderness. There was no Kankamega's highway then. He'd take a blanket, a gun, a fish line, salt pork and cornmeal, and explore the White Mountains. Dick, who is part Mohawk Indian, would watch the tourists on the AT, then go off by himself before they saw him. "I was always intrigued by the AT," he said. In the winter, he'd take his $6 maple skis, secured by rubber bands since he couldn't afford ski bindings, and ski sections of the AT. By the time he finished high school, he'd covered the whole AT in New Hampshire. "I've always loved the mountains, the feeling of serenity and feeling close to the powers that be," he said. "Hiking the trails was the greatest experience of my life." Dick's advice for new hikers is to set your pace, hike the way you feel. One day you might feel like hiking just 6 miles. The next day maybe you'll feel like 20. Remember that different people have different paces. I start off slow in the morning and go steady all day. Some people go in dashes and stops. At 3 or 4 in the afternoon, I'd pass young people who had left early in the morning like eager beavers. We'd camp together again that night. Everyone has to set his own pace, so he'll be comfortable. Despite all his mishaps, Dick, at 73, is still cheerful and hard at work clearing trails in Hawaii.